Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining in this presentation. And like many of you, I'm a therapist, I'm a writer, and a visual artist. In fact, I just wrote a book on creativity called The Creative Trance, Altered States of Consciousness in the Creative Process. It's coming out in 2022 by Cambridge University Press. And of course, you all know tonight's speech is being taped and utilized for public consumption, so you might want to adjust your video and Zoom adjustments. So let me do a share screen and bring up the PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, we're going to go into show mode now. All right. There we are. Sometimes in life, things take 2 clicks. You know, you have to remember that. And I have to remember that. So this slide, as you saw in Pam's terrific introduction to all the works, is in the current show. It's called Advice to the Imperfect. Here's the work without, I have cats, so if you see me do this, it's cat hairs. So it's called Advice to the Imperfect, and since we are all imperfect, it's advice for all of us. And while I didn't have an anomalous experience here, tonight's presentation for me is creativity and the unusual, anomalous experiences in visual art. And while this painting, I didn't have an anomalous experience of painting this, I thought it looks like an anomalous experience because the swimmer is coming from a bounded into an unbounded area. And that's what an anomalous experience feels like. It feels like a constricted world is opening up to infinite possibilities because what is existing we didn't know could exist. And so the work is about the potential inherent in all of us who can enlarge our lives by moving away from confinement into the possible and all possibilities. And you can look at the painting, you could say, well, you know, rationally, these umbrellas impede her swimming, but psychologically, they're a strength. Holding the 2 umbrellas is like acknowledging 2 points of view. It's both the end of dichotomy and the nature of paradox. And we know at the heart of every paradox is an experience of fusion that can bring insights, breakthroughs, and transformations. So this talk is about anomalous experiences. What are they? When you know somebody is calling before you see their name on the phone, the hunch that warns you of danger, or a vivid dream. Also, lucid dreaming, mystical events, past lives, healing, and near-death experiences. And according to a University of Chicago opinion poll, approximately 67% of the respondents reported having anomalous experiences. And research found similar rates in Europe and Australia. And someone who had multiple anomalous experiences was our president, Abraham Lincoln. He was really quite extraordinary and quite gifted. I'm sorry if you hear all my papers rustling, but I have so much written down that I didn't want to forget it. I wanted to give you all of the information I could. These are from his autobiography that was told to Lamont, his close friend. And his first anomalous experience that we have a record of was shortly after he was elected. It was for the first time. It was in 1860. And Lincoln looked in the mirror, he glanced in the mirror, all of a sudden he saw a double of himself. He saw one image of himself looking very healthy, but the other image was spectral. And Lincoln realized, he said, this is an omen. And he interpreted it as he would live one full term, be healthy, and be reelected to a second term, but not live to see its completion. And perhaps his most famous anomalous event was that he dreamt his own death. He had a precognitive dream. He had this dream where he was walking through the White House and it was empty, except he heard people sobbing. And finally, he got to the East Wing and he sees soldiers guarding a corpse. And he says to one of the soldiers, "Who has died?" And the soldier answers, "It's the president. He was shot by an assassin." This was just a few days before his death. And here, I love this picture because he looks like he can see. You know, he looks like he has clear seeing eyes. Not all of his predictions were dire. He used to dream Union victories, and that made him very happy. He would have this happy dream before the victory at Gettysburg and Antietam and other places. And then the night before the day he died, he had one of these very happy dreams. And he was so happy from it that his wife said, "I'd never seen him in such good spirits." And he said to her, "Mary, I think the war is now coming to an end." That night, April 14th, 1865, he was shot by John Wilkes Booth. And what it was, he was dreaming not the Civil War that came to an end, but it was the personal struggles, his personal struggles. Then he was an ultimately triumphant human being, and that was the victory. So, as far as we know, Lincoln's intuitive experiences, his anomalous events were unintentional, but anomalous events can be intentional. And I think one of the most well-known areas is science fiction. And here is an early example. This is an 1865 novel by Jules Verne. You see, From the Earth to the Moon. He foretold aspects of the Apollo 11 landing, which took place over 100 years later. He even said they took off from Florida in an aluminum rocket. And here is another science fiction novel. This is a 1911 work by Hugo Gernsback. It's called Ralph 124C41+. And in it, he anticipates face-to-face electronic communication, as you can see here, along with digital signing and transmission of documents, smart homes that respond to voice commands with lights that change colors, and a headset that facilitated electronic writing by thoughts. Here's another. This is Looking Backward by Edward Bellamy, and this is from 1888. And it's about a Rip Van Winkle character who goes to sleep in the 19th century, and he wakes up in the year 2000. And what he finds is a world without money. He was the first person to introduce the idea of a credit card. So we can see the future. Also, visual artists see the future. And let's look at some of their work. This is a 1910 postcard by Villemard. He did a series of them about what life would be like in the year 2000. This is his idea of airmail. Do you see the rural postman? And sometimes predictions can be eerie. This is a 1905 concept of the future Strasbourg train station. And doesn't it look like the New York City tram to Roosevelt Island? And here's a painting that hangs in the National Gallery. It's called City of Fantasy. The painter's unknown. It was done in 1850, but look at the skyline. Look at the skyline in the top. That skyline of tall skyscrapers, thin buildings, that didn't appear for 100 years, not 100 until 100 years later. So now I'd like to speak about my own art and some anomalous events. And very often they'll have psychological roots in my art. And sometimes they don't. They just completely are numinous. So here's a painting I did, Travelogues, and it actually was based on Einstein's theory of general relativity, which says that time can actually curve and form a loop. So theoretically, it's possible to meet yourself at another point in time. And I thought, oh, I'd like to make a painting of that. What would the person look like? Would they be, maybe they'd be ghostly, a spectral figure. And then I thought, how am I going to paint a ghostly figure? And I remembered that I had seen the ghost of my neighbor Vivian. After she died, the ghost appeared in my home. And it was greenish yellow haze, but I wasn't at all afraid. Vivian had been a very nice, gentle person in her life. So I just presumed her ghost would be too. So here is an archival print. The former, what you saw was an oil painting. This is Travelogues, an archival print. And about meeting yourself in time, the German philosopher Wolfgang von Goethe actually did meet himself in time. A very famous incident. He was on the road to Drusenheim, and in his mind's eye, he saw himself coming toward him. But he was wearing clothes he didn't recognize. He thought, well, that's interesting, filed the image away. 8 years later, he's coming from Drusenheim, the exact same road, the exact same spot, remembers the image, looks down, and he's wearing the clothes he saw 8 years earlier, but did not recognize. So there's also a synchronistic aspect of this painting. Do you see the hat that he's wearing, the fedora? My friend, the theoretical physicist Hung Tse, he's decided that the figure is actually the mathematician Kurt Gödel meeting himself in time, because Gödel was the one who did the mathematics for the closed time loops. And here he is with Einstein. He's wearing the exact same kind of hat. So there's one other aspect of this image. And you know, you can see I work in series, and you'll see that throughout the talk. This is purely psychological. This, I keep turning to the side because that's where I see all your faces, and I should look up at the camera. This is a painting of resilience. This image is resilience. This man is all of us. If it snows and it's cold, we keep going. If the buttons are missing from our overcoat, we wrap it around us. If we don't have gloves, we hold one hand with another. But we just keep going because we know it doesn't snow forever. And so here's the next. The first several images you're going to see are all about people traveling. So here's another traveler. It's a lovely anomalous event that I'm sure we wish we could all have. I certainly would like to have be able to fly in a magic carpet. And here the child is playing with the bird, and they're both having such a lovely time. This is called Nightbirds, and it's an oil on canvas. And the Kabbalah says that when we sleep each night, our soul journeys home. And the child is our soul and has never forgotten how to fly or how to reach our home. And this child is traveling through darkness, indicating that we can express our joy in dark times as well as sunlight, because joy comes from within. And I usually almost always start my paintings like this one with a drawing. So I thought you might like to see one of my drawings. This is called High Joy, and it's on Whatman blue paper. That's what I use for most of my drawings. It's it's 28 inches by 42 inch paper, handmade linen rag. And it's the sizes vary slightly because it's handmade, but again, the baby looks so happy. And here is another traveler. This is called Memories. It's an oil on canvas. And it's an anomalous image because it's an emotional landscape. Who could carry an overburdened cart with all those tracks with tiny wheels through deep snow? It's not possible. It's an emotional image. And what it is, it's all of us who carry things through life that we should let go. It's a painting about jettisoning the benefits of jettisoning the unnecessary, to travel without the unnecessary. But during this painting, I had an anomalous image that has some psychological basis. You see the clouds at the top of the sky? I couldn't get them. I was working on them for hours, and it was so frustrating. Finally, I couldn't stop working. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning. I couldn't stop working, and I couldn't stand to look at the canvas. So what I did was I turned my head away, and I just painted like this. I only looked down at the palette to put more paint on my brush. After a while, I looked up, and the clouds were there. And I mean, one can say this is implicit memory, you know, procedural memory. It's muscle memory encoded in, you know, years of painting. And I completely agree with that. So it's a psychological basis. But it didn't go over any of the things in the painting. You know, it didn't go lower. So it still, for me, has an element of the numinous. And this is a very large oil painting called Pilgrim. And I'm showing it to you because I had a precognitive experience with this painting. I was struggling to do the stones at the bottom. You're going to hear a lot about struggling because I know so many of you are artists and you know how art takes a great deal of struggle, but it's perseverance. So they were difficult, but finally they came out to these nice white stones. I said, this is really great. 6 months later, on a trip to San Francisco, I saw those stones. And that was an amazing experience for me, an experience of profound connection, because I felt so connected to the stones I had seen 6 months before in my mind and in my art. And I think it relates to what the theoretical physicist David Bohm wrote about the implicate order. He wrote an excellent book, Wholeness in the Implicate Order. He says there's an order beneath the phenomenal world. And in that order is the unbroken totality, a wholeness of all existence. And that the seeming separation of objects and people in our daily life, which he calls the explicate order, is illusory. Instead, we're all confluences of energy in an ever-moving field. And this deep universal field of non-locality and non-separability, it's not surprising to have anomalous experiences, which are non-local occurrences. And these can appear through the expanded consciousness, the very porous consciousness of the creative process. Here's another image of precognition, but the figure in the painting is precognitive. This is a man in battle, it's an anti-war drawing, and he is seeing his own death. You can see he's reflected as the skeleton in the water, and he's frozen with fear. He's finished with fighting. His eyes stare out just at far, far distance. This is called the 1,000-yard stare in battle, and that's the name of this drawing. And here is a painting on canvas. This is called Gaia. I do a lot of images of Native America in my work. And she is the goddess of earth. And as you can see, her hair flows into the leaves, her moccasins into the ground. I had an anomalous experience in that years later, after I did this work, I found out about buffalo calf woman. And a white buffalo calf woman. And she's native, she's sacred to the Native American Lakota. She gave them their 7 holy ceremonies, incorporated the 4 ages of creation within herself, and said one day she would return to them. And somehow this reminds me of that. Here is an oil painting called Quana. And, you know, sometimes you can look at something and you can be so transfixed, it changes your life forever. And that happened to me. I saw a small, like 5 by 7 inch photograph, and it was all tattered, and it was a picture of Quanah Parker, and that's the man in this painting. He was a great American. He was the greatest chief of the Comanche and their last chief. His mother was a Texan woman, and she was kidnapped on a raid. So he's of mixed ancestry, and he grew up to be a great warrior. He believed in education for his tribe. He learned English. He lobbied Congress for rights of Native Americans, invested in railroads, and became a friend of Theodore Roosevelt. So he was really quite an extraordinary man. And you see the bird in the image. It's a hawk. Later, I found out he was called the eagle of the Comanche. An interesting synchronicity. The smoke in his hand, to me, that was spirit. It turns out later I found out he was a very spiritual man and one of the founders of the Native American Church. And this is an image I did of him as a spiritual being. And he's connected to the hawk, and he's just bathed in light. And he's a beautiful aura. I see auras sometimes. I was born that way, but I was raised in a highly atheistic family, staunch atheist. So I suppressed the ability. And then when I became more spiritual in my late 20s, it came out. So this is called The Mother of All Things, and it's a drawing, graphite on paper. And these are two women. They are also taken from old photographs. The one on the left is a Menominee from Wisconsin. The one on the right is a Delaware from Oklahoma. They never met in life. I doubt they ever met, but on my drawing, they meet. And one happy, one angry, but together they form a pair. And this gives the work a humorous quality, but it has a serious meaning. The message is that all our thoughts arise from the same undifferentiated ground of being. Seen here is a darkness that connects and separates their seemingly disparate landscapes. The chasm between their outwardly disconnected world makes the image appear anomalous, yet it symbolizes the pervasive underlying ocean of energy that generates all material existence, called dark energy, vacuum energy, the void, or zero-point energy. In physics, it's really the mother of all things in our phenomenal world. Psychologically, I believe that we mirror generation from an underlying existence because our unconscious is analogous to an internal zero-point energy field that creates our emotional reality. Awareness of an inherent plasticity in the underlying field of being allows us to respond positively or negatively to any situation. It makes us more plastic. It makes us capable of modulating our responses, realizing that they shape our lives. Here's another drawing from Native America. I still don't quite know what this means, but the model was Molly, a very beautiful, white, gentle horse. And at the bottom of the drawing is a kiva, which is a Native American place for prayer and meditation. And you can see the ladder goes up from the kiva, goes down into the kiva. In a sense, meditation, we go into ourselves and we also transcend ourselves. And the space between the ladder and the reflection of the horse is that leap of faith that you have to take, either for spiritual change or any change in yourself. We're always leaping. What I don't know is whether the person in the kiva becomes the horse and rides off, or whether they ride the horse and go off. But, and sometimes I guess we never know the full meanings of our work. You know, Marcel Duchamp said that that works of art reside 50% in the viewer. I'm also influenced by Eastern works. This is an archival print on paper, and it's an image of the venerable Zen master Soen Nakagawa Roshi. He was an abbot of the Ryutako Monastery in Japan. He was a teacher, a calligrapher, and a poet, and he was one of the main people who brought Zen Buddhism to the Western world. And here he rises above the landscape. His hand is stopping the volcano. And this symbolizes how we stop the fires of the mind during meditation. When he does this, the clouds of obscurity fade around his head and the clear blue void opens. And as he rises above the mental, emotional landscape, a new day is dawning. You can see the golden light. Our emotions form an inner landscape, and acknowledging their presence with detachment can, for us, produce a state of inner calm. Here's another. This is a painting on canvas. It's called Sameness, Depth of Mystery. And the seemingly anomalous fading of light of the image fading into light and dark in this image, it symbolically addresses the oneness of being and refers to the Buddhist Heart Sutra, which says form is emptiness and emptiness is form. In Buddhism, the umbrella can symbolize the Bodhi tree, where a Buddha became enlightened, and having a little acolyte hold the umbrella for the monk shows us that enlightenment can come from the smallest stimulus. And also, the image looks hierarchical. You know, here's the little acolyte holding umbrella for the monk. But when we know that everything fades into light and darkness, and that form is emptiness, and emptiness is form, we also know that hierarchy is an illusion. Here's the last Eastern image I'm going to show, and then I have a few others. This is called the Eternal Presence. It's a lovely little Buddhist nun, and I made her like one of the statues of Kuan Yin, you know, multiple heads and multiple arms. And it's called the Eternal Presence because the divine, all of the arms of Kuan Yin, all of the gestures are in a simultaneous now. This print was made from a pastel drawing. And when I was making the pastel drawing, I had a very profound anomalous experience. I was struggling with the hands. You know, she has a lot of hands and she's got a lot of fingers, and I wanted to get them correct, but I just couldn't do it. And finally, in utter disgust, I said, I'm going to lie down. And I just lay down, and the minute I closed my eyes, I don't know whether it was a meditative image or a hypnagogic image, but I saw this little nun, but she was alive. She was a little girl in my vision. I saw her clear as day. There was beautiful light shining down from above, and she was just as if she was communicating to me. And what she was doing, she was opening and closing all her hands, so I could see the workings of her fingers. She was helping me do my art. It was so extraordinary. So she felt like a wonderful gift from a spiritual realm that came into my conscious awareness. So after seeing her open and close her fingers several times, I was able to return to the pastel and complete the hands. I have no explanation for this. I'm just grateful. I have gratitude rather than an explanation. This is the last group of works. I have a few works to show you. It's about the power of the feminine and the process of individuation. This is called Hineni Hitbotdudut, and I don't know that I'm pronouncing it correctly because it's in Hebrew. Hineni means here I am. Hitbotdudut means holy aloneness or a nighttime encounter with the divine. This drawing is about just communicating with the divine directly. You don't need a place of worship. You can just communicate directly. This was a process in mystical Judaism, but I think it's a capacity we all have. And here the lightning is shining down. That comes from a Jewish prayer saying, days pass and the years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. And it says to God, lightning should illuminate the path where we walk and to show us that this world is indeed full of miracles. She looks like me when I was younger. I actually had a few different models for this image, but when it started to look like me, I made it look more like me. I don't know how and when the owl appeared, but I like owls, and to me, she symbolizes the inner wisdom we all have. Here's another drawing. It's called the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone in Jungian psychology and is an alchemy, signifies the end result, the final transformation that we can reach. In other words, the highest stage in the transformation process. And here's that little child, which is all of us. This is all our inner child, and it's reaching the light. You see how it's successful, and it's not easy. This is a winding road. You don't get to that light in the straight path. The anomalous experience that happened with this drawing is that I wanted to put something in the bend of the road, and I didn't know what to put in. I thought, well, I mean, what could it be? Could it be a snake that was jarring? I wanted something jarring. And then one morning, just thinking about something else, all of a sudden I heard a voice in my head that did not sound like my voice at all, saying, "Where's yet a precious jewel in its head?" I knew immediately I had to put in a toad, because it was from Shakespeare's play As You Like It, that the toad, ugly and venomous, yet wears a precious jewel in its head. And that's how the toad got in there. Now, this is a very common experience, anomalous experience, often called the muse throughout the centuries. So here's another image. And this one is called the Inner Isaiah. Now, it's a drawing, and it has wash and pastel and pencil on paper. As the drawings change, and I worked on this for many years, I only finished it this year, the meanings change along with the drawings. At first I thought, oh, this is a Midwestern woman with eyeglasses as God, which made me very happy. And she's creating worlds. And then, and that is definitely one of the meanings, but you see that the machine is attached to her. That machine is a bullet making machine. She's turning a weapon into creativity, good creativity. And it reminded me of a phrase from the Old Testament, from Isaiah, about turning swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks, and that nations shall practice war no more. So here, this machine is part of hers. At first I thought, oh, I'm making a linear machine producing nonlinear worlds, but then I made it a nonlinear machine. I made it Escher-like. So it's a hyperdimensional structure. It couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. But we all have this bullet-making machine within us that we can turn into creativity. Freud spoke about that with sublimation. And so the painting drawing is called the Inner Isaiah. And look, and here is our next to the last image. And this is called Legacy. And to me, it's an analogy of therapy and spiritual practice, because I see us as therapists transmitting wisdom to our patients, and they are symbolized by birds who are the souls. You see the wording, compassionate healer, awareness arising out of the ocean of the unconscious. And she's giving them this lovely wisdom to eat, and they're flying in. The wisdom, can you see the gold disc in the top of the work? That is getting undifferentiated energy from the divine. It differentiates, and the pattern is a tesseract or a hypersquare. And that symbolizes multidimensional information. And that's what spiritual traditions believe, that they're, in the shamanistic tradition, the information comes from a hyperdimensional, a multidimensional source. I think we have that as therapists also, because we learn, but we transmute our learning. And in doing that, we create a further dimensionality to what we know. And here you see that there's a cord, and she's holding a small version of the disc in her hand, and she is the conduit to the disc in the other hand. And the lightning comes out, and that's illumination from the ocean of the unconscious. And so and of course she, I guess, is another person flying through the air. I like that. So let's look at our last drawing, and this is called Birth. And again, it's graphite, which is pencil and pastel on paper. And this is an intentional reference to the anomalous. I made it. Baby has a beautiful birth aura. You see how the lines are so nice and straight and even and healthy, and the pink, and the baby is pointing to the bird, which symbolizes the spiritual, listening to a conch, which symbolizes both the unconscious and is a transmission of, it's a Buddhist vehicle for transmission of wisdom. So it reminded me of a Wordsworth poem. In his Ode to Intimations of Immortality, he said, "We are born trailing clouds of glory. Do we come from God, who is our home? Heaven lies about us in our infancy." And this child also symbolizes rebirth. Birth is rebirth. In Jungian psychology, that's a very frequent phrase, because as we change, as we transform, as we grow, we are being reborn. And the Jungian analyst Marion Woodman said, "A life well lived is a series of birth canals." And so we are reborn with every transformation. And these are the ongoing steps in our continuing self-evolution. So here, if you want to know a bit more about my art, this is my website that has art. This website is my therapy website. You won't see any paintings, but this one you will. And I've written about my art in 2 articles, as you can see here. This is my book on Walls Become Doorways, and Pamela was so kind in speaking about that. It's about art and physical illness, and this is the book that's coming out soon about altered states of consciousness and creativity. And here we are at birth again. So thank you very much for having me in this spotlight for Mirrors of the Mind.